Hello and welcome to MagicGatheringStrat. This is Tobias and today I'm doing a review video on Turbo Exhume, and I recorded and released 13 matches with this deck, and I did countless more, and now it's pretty final in its state, and I want to take some time to explain the mechanics behind the deck and to show you what it's all about. As you can see from the name, it relies heavily on the card Exhume and on the graveyard, and it's a true combo deck, and your goal with this deck is to decide the game in turn 2. So turn 2 is your critical turn, and because of this, let's have a look at the mana base first. You play 16 lands, and of these 16 lands, roughly half of them comes into play tapped, and like geothermal device, they can be sacrificed for additional mana. So you want to play a tap land first turn, and in optimal conditions it's either geothermal crevice or sandstone needle and maybe sulfur vent, but sulfur vent is not so good as the other two. These are especially good because they produce red mana and you can sack them for green and black, and this allows you to cast almost everything of your cards. And Sandstone Needle, it produces 2 manas, but it's only red and you can only cast your loot spells with it. But your goal is to have 4 mana available in turn 2, and because of this, as I said, you want to play a tapped land turn 1, and you want to follow it up turn 2 either by mana acceleration in the form of Lotus Petal or Simian Spirit Guide and an untapped Swamp, or 2 mana acceleration cards. Both works. So no matter what, you want 4 mana in turn 2, and you want it because you most probably want to play one of your 8 loot spells, and Tormenting Voice costs 2 mana and Faithless Looting costs 1 mana. So you can go with 3 mana turn 2 if you got Faithless Looting, but if you want to cast Tormenting Voice and Exhume in turn 2, you need 4 mana. And turn 2 is critical because the blue control player has a hard time countering your spell turn 2, especially if you're on the play. And the mono-black control player usually is tapped out in turn 2, maybe in turn 3 as well, and cannot cause you to sacrifice a creature. And with these 8 loot spells, your goal is to get a combination of these cards here into the graveyard. And your centerpiece card is Ulamog's Crusher, which is an 8/8 creature with Annihilator. And the Annihilator is the game deciding mechanic, because if you manage to reanimate to Exhume an Ulamog's Crusher and have a Dragon Breath in the graveyard, and you're doing it turn 2, then your Ulamog's Crusher will be able to attack because Dragon Breath gives haste, and the Annihilator effect will decide the game. Because there are only very few 1 mana cards that can deal with the Ulamog's Crusher. Innocent Blood is an example that can deal with an Ulamog's Crusher, but most decks don't run it. Dragon Breath is a creature enchantment, and it has a trigger. Whenever a creature with converted mana cost 6 or greater enters the battlefield, you may return this card from the graveyard enchanting the creature. And Dragon Breath gives haste, and Dragon Fangs does the same thing, but it gives trample and it gives +1/+1. And don't forget, you can pump the creature with red mana and the Dragon Breath too. So these are versatile cards, and they trigger on both. They trigger on Ulamog's Crusher and they trigger on Gurmag Angler. So Gurmag Angler in this deck is sort of an alternative win condition or a follow-up plan if your first win condition fails, because sometimes you end up shuffling and looting cards and filling your graveyard, but you just don't find Ulamog's Crusher or Exhume, and then the Gurmag Angler shines, because you will have many cards in your graveyard that you can remove for the Delve effect. And keep in mind that these sacklands produce 3 mana for the Gurmag Angler when you sacrifice them, because you can delve the card from your graveyard, and Lotus Petal produces 2 mana for the Gurmag Angler, so sometimes you're able to slam a Gurmag Angler with haste in turn 1 onto the battlefield, and that is just great. And you have these cards to loot into your graveyard, you have these 8 cards to find them, you have mana acceleration, you have your mana base, and this is the card, your center card. This here is, these are 8 free spells, but they have value on their own. They are free spells because they draw spells and don't cost you mana, don't cost you net mana. Gitaxian Probe is paid for by life almost all the time. You theoretically can pay blue mana by Lotus Petal or by Manamorphose or by sacrificing Sulfur Vent, but there will be very few occasions for you to do this. But this card gives you very valuable information. You get to see your opponent's hand. And this is interesting, especially when playing against mono-black control, because they often run Victim of Night. And Victim of Night can kill Olamok's Crusher, but it can't kill the Gurmag Angler because it's a zombie. And by this information, your whole game plan changes, and then suddenly you want to play the Gurmag Angler and keep the Olamok's Crusher back. So this is very valuable information. You get to dig deeper in your deck, and you get to draw a card. That's a pretty great card for just 2 life. Manamorphose is a nice card too. It allows you to arrange your mana pool in a new way, and you get to draw a card. But basically it's a free spell. It's interesting, you can cast it for green mana, because I have been in the situation that I had to sacrifice my Geothermal Crevice for black and green, and then I could cast my Manamorphose and get 4 cards for the Gurmag Angler, so to speak, for mana, because Manamorphose makes mana for Gurmag Angler, and this does make mana for Gurmag Angler. So with just sacrificing Geothermal Crevice and Manamorphose, you're halfway to a Gurmag Angler to having it in play. Yeah, I did not tell you anything about the loot cards. Faceless Looting, of course, is a fantastic card in this deck. It just costs 1 red mana, draws you 2 cards, and lets you discard 2 cards. And there is no drawback in this build, because you want cards in your graveyard, and you get to dig deeper through your deck, and the flashback is also nice. And yeah, just one of the best loot cards for Reanimator type decks. Tormenting Voice is an interesting card, because it has an additional cost, and the additional costs forces you to sacrifice a card, and then afterwards you get to draw 2 cards. And here we come to the one auxiliary card, Stinkweed Imp. Stinkweed Imp has nice effects. It protects you against sacrifice effects like Diabolic Edict or Janus Edict or something like this. And it has Dredge. It fills your graveyard. So if you have an Exhume in hand but don't have a valuable target in the graveyard, you just want to dredge Stinkweed Imp to find Olamok's Crusher, Gurmag Angler, and the Dragon Breath or Fangs. And you can do this for quite some time. And moreover, you can discard the Stinkweed Imp as the additional cost of Tormenting Voice, and then be able to dredge it as one of the 2 cards you would draw of the Tormenting Voice. So this is a very well working mechanic to fill your graveyard quickly. And this nicely sums up the main deck. Keep in mind that Simian Spirit Guide has a casting cost, and you can play it as a creature. And if you don't need the mana acceleration, I recommend playing it as a creature, because this too protects you from sacrificing effects. And because of the many sacklands that produce additional manas, you are often in a situation that you can hardcast your Olamok's Crusher and have Exhume backup in hand. And I have cast Olamok's Crusher more than once on turn 4, hardcast. Most of the time it gets killed, sure, but that does not matter. You just need a way to get it into the graveyard to be able to exhume it. And Ulamog's Crusher with haste is nice. So this sums up the main deck. Here comes the sideboard. I'm sorting it by name. Okay, does not work. Okay, sideboard is a combination of cards that you can play and cards that are meant to be played. Does this make sense? I hope it does. Because you cannot play every card type. You cannot play much creature removal because every creature you remove will come back when you cast Exhume. So the only creature removal I got in the sideboard is Magma Spray. And it's in the sideboard because of Delver Fiend. Delver Fiend is one of the few decks that has the potential or has the speed to kill you before you can react. Because they can kill in turn 3 or turn 4, and they don't need many permanents in play to do so. So you need a way to shut down on turn 2 Kiln Fiend without it coming back, and that's why Magma Spray is here, because it kills the Kiln Fiend and it will exile it. And sometimes I use it against regular Delver, and it's okay against dredge type decks, like the decks that run Stinkweed Imps or other annoying card and rely heavily on creatures in their graveyard. It's not good in the mirror match, but you could try it in the mirror match. And yeah, as I said, there is not much creature removal that you can play. Electricity is the other creature removal I play in the sideboard, and it's mainly against tokens, because if your opponent produces a ton of goblin tokens or soldier tokens or whatever, they can just drag the game to a point where they can handle the Ulamog's Crusher. And because of this, you need a way to get rid of the tokens so that the Annihilator effect will kill their lands and end the game this way. And Duress is a card you need against almost every deck. I think that you are favored in the first game, no matter against which deck you are playing. And after sideboarding, you almost always need to board in Duress, because your opponent will add additional removal for the graveyard or for the Ulamog's Crusher, and you have to stop this removal from happening, and Duress is the fastest card for this. And I almost always board out 1 or 2 or 4 Stinkweed Imp and 1 or 2 Gitaxian Probes for the 4 Duress. So this I almost do in every game. And if the opponent is relying on blue as a controlling color, I add Pyroblasts. This is against regular Delver, or the black and blue creatureless control deck that wins by milling you. Here you just want to counter the counter spell. But Duress is the better card for you, because Duress produces mana for the Gurmag Angler. This is true for Pyroblast as well, but Duress is an active card and Pyroblast is a reactive card. So if you want to play fast, you play Duress, because it will fill your graveyard without your opponent having to react first. I hope this sentence construction made sense to you. And the last card in the graveyard I want to talk about is the Ingot Chewer. Ingot Chewer is in against Tron and against Affinity. Mainly against Affinity. Tron is not so much of a problem. They are not fast enough. Tron is a very good matchup. Usually I don't board anything against Tron, maybe Duress, because of the Relic of Protenitus. But Affinity is a matchup that can actually kill your Ulamog's Crusher. And they kill Ulamog's Crusher by blocking it with a Mirror Enforcer or the green guy that is 4/4 and Galvanic Blast, or a combination of these 3 cards. And by this they can deal with Ulamog's Crusher, and the bad thing is Exhume brings their blocker back. So they have a pretty okay matchup against you. And in these matches, I board in the Ingot Chewer and I use it to destroy their lands. Probably on turn 2, I want to start destroying their lands, and then when I when I cast Exhume and I'm exhuming Ingot Chewer, then I can start to remove creatures, destroy creatures that they have. But it's primarily land destruction against affinity type decks. So this is the deck. I hope you pick it up and play it. It's an all-in strategy. Always keep in mind you're playing an all-in deck and you want to force a game decision on turn 2. Okay? Games drag on. Usually you get your game decision by turn 3, 4 or 5, but turn 2 is the goal. And there are a fair number of games that you can decide on turn 2. Your opponent won't be beaten in turn 2 because he will have a positive life total, but he will be in a situation where he cannot react because your Ulamog's Crusher just crushes him by annihilating 2 of his permanents each turn, and by this your opponent won't have more than 1 land in turn and just cannot deal with the Ulamog's Crusher. And yes, have fun playing this, and I hope that someone will pick it up, and I see you around soon. Bye bye.